Reflections of a Simple American. Brought to you by Spirituality. Episode 1, Part 2, George Washington's Farewell Address. Greetings, citizen, and welcome back. In this episode of Reflections of a Simple American, I look forward to your company in listening to Washington turn his attention to the subject of union. This is the longest section of his address, which helps impress upon my mind its importance to our liberty in the United States of America. I hope we can all reflect on this importance. Chapter 2, Union.
Interwoven as is the love of liberty with every ligament of your hearts, no recommendation of mine is necessary to fortify or confirm the attachment. The unity of government, which constitutes you one people, is also now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed, to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth. As this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously directed, it is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourselves to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can in any event be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. For this you have every inducement of sympathy and interest. Citizens by birth or choice of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of difference, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint counsels and joint efforts of common dangers, sufferings, and successes. But these considerations, however powerfully they address themselves to your sensibility, are greatly outweighed by those which apply more immediately to your interest. Here, every portion of our country finds the most commanding motives for carefully guarding and preserving the union of the whole. The North, in an unrestrained intercourse with the South, protected by the equal laws of a common government, finds, in the productions of the latter, great additional resources of maritime and commercial enterprise, and precious materials of manufacturing industry. The South, in the same intercourse, benefiting by the agency of the North, sees its agriculture grow and its commerce expand. Turning partly into its own channels, the seamen of the North, it finds its particular navigation invigorated, and, while it contributes in different ways to nourish and increase the general mass of the national navigation, it looks forward to the protection of a maritime strength to which itself is unequally adapted. The East, in a like intercourse with the West, already finds, and in the progressive improvement of interior communications by land and water, will more and more find a valuable vent for the commodities which it brings from abroad or manufactures at home. The West derives from the East supplies requisite to its growth and comfort, and what is perhaps of still greater consequence, it must of necessity owe the secure enjoyment of indispensable outlets for its own productions to the weight, influence, and the future maritime strength of the Atlantic side of the Union, directed by an indissoluble community of interest as one nation. Any other tenure by which the West can hold this essential advantage, whether derived from its own separate strength or from an apostate and unnatural connection with any foreign power, must be intrinsically precarious. While then, every part of our country thus feels an immediate and particular interest in union, all the parts combined cannot fail to find in the united mass of means and efforts greater strength, greater resource, proportionably greater security from external danger, a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations, and, what is of inestimable value, they must derive from union an exemption from those broils and wars between themselves, which so frequently afflict neighboring countries not tied together by the same governments, which their own rivalships alone would be sufficient to produce, but which opposite foreign alliances, attachments, and intrigues would stimulate and embitter. Hence, likewise, they will avoid the necessity of those overgrown military establishments, which, under any form of government, are inauspicious to liberty, and which are to be regarded as particularly hostile to republican liberty. In this sense it is that your union ought to be considered as a main prop of your liberty, and that the love of the one ought to endear to you the preservation of the other. These considerations speak a persuasive language to every reflecting and virtuous mind, and exhibit the continuance of the Union as a primary object of patriotic desire. Is there a doubt whether a common government can embrace so large a sphere? Let experience solve it. To listen to mere speculation in such a case were criminal. We are authorized to hope that a proper organization of the whole, with the auxiliary agency of governments for the respective subdivisions, will afford a happy issue to the experiment. It is well worth a fair and full experiment. With such powerful and obvious motives to union, affecting all parts of our country, while experience shall not have demonstrated its impracticability, there will always be reason to distrust the patriotism of those who in any quarter may endeavor to weaken its bands. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. The inhabitants of our Western country have lately had a useful lesson on this head. They have seen, in the negotiation by the executive and in the unanimous ratification by the Senate of the treaty with Spain, and in the universal satisfaction at that event throughout the United States, a decisive proof how unfounded were the suspicions propagated among them of a policy in the general government and in the Atlantic states unfriendly to their interests in regard to the Mississippi. They have been witnesses to the formation of two treaties, that with Great Britain and that with Spain, which secure to them everything they could desire in respect to our foreign relations, towards confirming their prosperity. Will it not be their wisdom to rely for the preservation of these advantages on the union by which they were procured? Will they not henceforth be deaf to those advisers, if such there are, who would sever them from their brethren and connect them with aliens?
Interpretation and reflection.
Washington knows that liberty is in the people's hearts. He states that his personal words aren't needed to affirm this, yet he is setting up a framework for speaking further about how to preserve liberty. Words that he believes should resound because of the liberty found in the hearts of the people. As he continues on into paragraph 9, Washington delves deeply into unity and what it means to the people in this next paragraph. He speaks of this unity as the main pillar in our independence. The list of what it means to us is very strong. This unity gives us peace, tranquility, safety, prosperity, and even our highly prized liberty. He then gives an accompanying warning that there will be opposition in diverse ways that will seek to weaken these truths about the nature of our national unity from our minds. This is the focal point. I feel like this is the wall of defense that will be attacked from without and from within, oftentimes in a subtle way. He gives counsel that we should always hold our union dear and recognize its value to each and to all. We should always think and speak of it as a core ideal of our prosperity. We need to be vigilant for any attacks on our unity as a country and to question the motives of any who would suggest that part of our country should be removed from the rest. I really like his strong wording here, and to me it feels like some of these points are emphasized heavily. I'd like to read back this paragraph in his words, highlighting this emphasis. Begin quote, "The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also near dear to you. It is justly so, for it is the main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed, to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, as this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously, directed. It is of an infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourselves to think and speak of it as the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can in any event be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts." Close quote. In the next paragraph, Washington begins to speak more of unity and unifying characteristics of the people, that citizens through either choice or birth are all Americans, and that we should hold this patriotism of our shared status as citizens of the United States of America over all other loyalties. This was mainly speaking of local loyalties, such as region or state. Being a patriotic American should be a higher priority than either of those. Washington then continues by reminding the people of more similarities that they all share, from their fighting together side by side to their similar religious culture and principles, and reminding that liberty and independence were a result of these things, as well as joint counsels, efforts, and sufferings. In paragraph 11, Washington begins to transition from a broader speech on unity in general by mentioning that there are more immediate examples regarding unity. This is to set up the next paragraph where he delves into regional benefits of unity. In paragraph 12, Washington delves into specific examples of how each different region of the United States benefits from being in a state of union with the others. Some of the parts that stood out to me were how he described the benefits that union between the regions would receive. He mentions equal laws of a common government when he describes the North's relationship with the South, and in that same relationship, how the South is benefiting by the agency of the North. East and West also give benefit to one another, with emphasis on the benefit that the West gains from trade and support in the efforts of its growth. This unity grants strength that would not be possible through any other means, such as aid from a foreign power. In this next paragraph, Washington continues to speak about how this union will benefit all of the parts in the manner of greater strength, more resources, greater security from exterior sources, including foreign nations, but in addition, there won't be instances of fighting against one another, as it is common to happen among bordering nations, which tend to build and maintain extensive standing militaries. The very presence of extensive militaries standing in times of peace, in principle, are hostile towards Republican liberty. He then finishes the paragraph by circling back to union being a main prop of liberty, and that by loving union will endear us to the preservation of liberty. In paragraph 14, Washington begins by appealing to citizens that possess reflective and virtuous minds, and again addresses the subject of union, and speaks of it as a primary object of patriotic desire. To me, this once again reinforces the importance of union. He then goes on with a question about if government can embrace such a large undertaking, then answers it by looking to experience to solve it, and follows up with a warning about the dangers of speculation alone. He then begins speaking of the branches of power, and if they are properly organized and balanced, our American experiment of a constitutional republic will have a greater chance of success and be well worth it. Washington then finishes up by emphasizing yet again how strong our union is, and that we should distrust the patriotism of any who attempt to weaken this union. To conclude the portion of his address on union, Washington brings up a concern of disturbance of union, which is that of men seeking to cause geographical division by means of exaggerating the differences of one region with another. These parties often misrepresent the views of other local regions to entrench themselves in power within their own. Washington speaks of how difficult it can be to shield ourselves from these efforts, as they can exploit jealousies within us, but such efforts of misrepresentation only cause to alienate us from each other, instead of being one united people. He then describes a recent example from his time regarding a treaty with Spain and how there was misrepresentation between different regions in the United States. He ends this paragraph and section of the address with several reflective questions. Begin quote, "Will it not be their wisdom to rely for the preservation of these advantages on the union by which they were procured? Will they not henceforth be deaf to those advisers, if such there are, who would sever them from their brethren and connect them with aliens?" Close quote. To me, these reflective questions at the end of his section on union are important. In our days, are we indeed relying on the advantages of our union, or are we listening to influence that seeks to separate one from another?
Thanks for stopping by. If you haven't seen episode 1 yet, you can find it on the Spirituality YouTube channel. Episode 3 is planned to release on Saturday, July 18th, so stay tuned if you'd like to continue to study Washington's farewell address together.